most important competitiveness in any healthy society is competitiveness in ideas. That is how ideas are tested, and that is how good ideas win out over bad. And only a very weak idea demands that it must be protected from any criticism.
The whole climate issue and the climate science has been dominated by, of course, government funding. If you can't find a dead polar bear somewhere, you're not going to get funded. It's really been that bad.
I started speaking out, saying that scientists needed to do better at making the data and supporting information publicly available, being more transparent about how they reach conclusions, doing a better job of assessing uncertainties, and actively engaging with scientists having minority perspectives. The response of my colleagues to this is summed up by the title of a 2010 article in the Scientific American, "Climate Heretic Judith Curry Turns on Her Colleagues."
What does it mean to debate? What does it mean to discuss? How do we as a society make decisions with conflicting information? These questions ground and frame much of open discourse for Western civilization. Dissent should be taken seriously, not ostracized. Take Galileo, for example, who is revered nowadays not only for calculating that the sun did not revolve around the earth, but because he stood up for his views even when they conflicted with popular opinion. This heritage of open discourse permeated its way into America's founding documents. The very first amendment to the U.S. Constitution states, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peacefully to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances." Unfortunately, the issue of the discussion of climate change has brought forth a serious threat to our most fundamental of rights. Just last year, 19 state attorney generals formed a coalition to launch legal action against energy companies on the grounds that climate denial was not protected by free speech. The precedent these AGs sought to draw on was the prosecution of tobacco companies under anti-racketeering laws. Under those laws, withholding information and purposely misleading the public on matters of health and safety did not protect the right of tobacco companies to claim that their products did not cause cancer. But is an energy company seeking to better understand complex climate systems and the extent of anthropogenic influences on Earth's temperatures on the same level of malicious intent? We do not believe so, and think that the precedent of suing those with other viewpoints puts the fundamental freedoms we as Americans hold dear under threat.
The lawsuit failed, but its ramifications continued, fiercely intimidating scientists who questioned the consensus view. Not only afraid of having legal actions taken against them, scientists now also face the threat of having their research funding cut if they do not produce results that their government donors wish to see.
Around November, there was a release of these ClimateGate emails. So that angers a lot of this activist group like Greenpeace and New York Times and all these others. They started to mount a rather serious, actually, sort of counter-attack, quote-unquote, on people like myself and all that. So, it forces my institution to actually release my email, for example. I mean, mine was released to Greenpeace, which is not a scientific organization, which is very unfortunate. So you can see the asymmetry and actually the imbalance and biases,
This is not an issue about being correct or incorrect. Even Dr. Ronald Sass, lead author of a UN IPCC report, would admit that the funding is predicated on the delivery of certain results.
Firstly, he criticized the United Nations. I'm thoroughly behind that idea. I worked for the United Nations for a while. The best thing about working for the United Nations is that you get to fly first class. The worst thing is that I got fired because I turned in a report which was not what they wanted to hear.
By eroding the integrity of these funding sources, the integrity of the argument has now been compromised. Even if a denier is incorrect, shouldn't they still have a voice? But then how can they have a voice if, should they speak out, they will be sued and have their funding pulled from beneath their feet? The products of dissent and skepticism of commonly held views has brought forth tremendous progress in history. The decision to end the intervention in Vietnam was not a product of the national majority silencing dissenters, but of anti-war protesters having a voice. When Susan B. Anthony fought for women's suffrage, she did so against a very reluctant society. But nonetheless, despite some attempts, she was not silenced. Her voice was heard, and we as a society are better because of it. Today, the questioning is reversed, but one side has sought to draw parallels between Holocaust denial and anthropogenic global warming skepticism. Professor Larry Bell explains.
If you don't believe there's some kind of Holocaust, then you're a bad person. You must not like Bambi. You don't like polar bears. You want to flood Al Gore's home on the coast. It's kind of beyond comprehension. When they talk about deniers, it's sort of, again, it's this denigration thing where if you don't believe there's a crisis, then you're like those people who denied the Holocaust is real. It's a very clear intent way to demonize anyone that disagrees with you, and it's part of this political correct society we've inherited, where if you disagree with someone or a point of view, it must be because you disagree with their lifestyle or their race or their background. You must be a bad person, because all the good people believe like we do.
Even if we all agree to disagree on the science, is skepticism of one's opinion really equivalent to Holocaust denial? What happened to the steeped American tradition of allowing dissent even when it is highly disagreeable?
In this particular age, we better be actually more open to discussion, more open to engaging each other, and then battle each other. Actually, we can actually agree to disagree, but very civilly, but based on ideas, the power of your ideas and your evidence, right? Rather than, all this nasty stuff that we've been seeing quite often, actually, these days. But that is just a very unfortunate side effect of people being too emotional on or too actually vetted in terms of their biases and interests.
It is our concerns as students of energy cultures that both sides of the global warming debate have put their heads in separate echo chambers. Is either side willing to entertain the argument that he or she may be wrong? Is either side even willing to admit there is the slightest amount of uncertainty of what the future will hold? What does this also say about the erosion of the scientific method? If we abandon the scientific method, are the results of these studies, even if they happen to be correct, still science, or in our secular society, has science become the new religion? If one deviates from the stated belief of the scientific academia, are they now the heretics that atheists were during the high point of the power of the Catholic Church? For the purposes of this video, our question to you is not whether or not the skeptics are correct, but rather whether or not the grounds of this discussion are fair and consistent with the values we all share as Americans. It is our hope that by listening to each other, we will be able to reach a more conclusive truth, and from there proceed with the necessary policy actions. Because at the end of the day, we all want the same thing, a future of prosperity and health.